sexy on Secular Sexuality.
Hello and welcome to Secular Sexuality, the ACA show that has been sober all day and is now bringing back cybersex like it's 1999. Joining me from her bunker in South Austin is, of course, our very own Bianca.
Hello, everybody.
And tonight, here again for the first time, we are happy to have Eclipse life coach Annette James to bring us some clarity on this incredible experience we're all in right now, to help us get grounded and to help us get through this crazy situation we're all finding ourselves in. So whether you are sheltered in place with family and friends, whether you are sheltered in place with your actual family, we hope that you can get a little bit of privacy and give us a call. Tonight, we're going to be at 512-991-9242. That number again is 512-991-9242. With that, thank you all so much for being here. I know it's been under kind of wild circumstances. Annette, thanks for giving us another chance.
Oh, thank you for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we get started, I guess I want to explain that we tried to have Annette on a few weeks ago before we got hit by a world of teleconferencing drama, something I imagine many of you are beginning to become accustomed to. With that kind of point of view, we have decided to spend a little bit of time just looking at the different stressors that all of us are experiencing during this time. Some of those can be, really obvious. The fact that we're all stuck inside, the fact that we're all stuck with our families, all of these different kinds of things. That stress can be really obvious in some ways, but really subtle in some others. So we're going to be kind of tackling some of those questions, as well as getting some good tips on just how to stay grounded and take care of ourselves during this time. Annette, can you tell us just a little bit about the type of work that you do?
Yeah, I am a life coach and counselor. So really that life coaching piece is I'm helping people with whatever it is that they want to do with their future. It's helping them get to whatever goal it is they want, whether it's of a personal nature, a career nature. Sometimes it's just making themselves better to where they're able to handle the stressors of daily life. And along the way, they sometimes get stuck. So usually what's keeping them stuck is some sort of past trauma. So that's where the trauma-based comes in, is I am actually trained in trauma. And it plays such a big part in the way that we do things and the way that we don't do things. And, and especially if you're trying to get over a hurdle or something, it could very well be a past trauma that you may be even totally unaware of. And I'm there to kind of help you through that process. And I give all my clients those tools needed so that they can kind of manage those obstacles in the future without too much difficulties.
Yeah, well, and obviously with all of the extra stress that so many of us are under right now, that trauma can get a little itchy. And kind of the nature of trauma is that you often don't even see it coming. You often don't even see that hurdle in front of you. I know it's a total therapist cliche, but people say name it to tame it for a reason. And I think there's a lot of value in trying to identify some of these really nebulous stressors we're all being exposed to right now. What are some of the seemingly invisible stress points that y'all have been seeing?
Oh gosh, well, I am a manager at a company that is remote 100% and has been for years. So on the one hand, everybody at my company, thankfully, is able to go day to day, not really feeling too much of a difference. But at the same time, it's that weird uncanny valley situation where you get up, you go to work, you talk to the same people, you do the same job. So your day to day doesn't feel different, but you're keenly aware that everything is different anyway. And I know that's something I've been struggling with. And that a lot of the people that report to me are also kind of grappling with right now. So I'm very excited to participate in this, not only as somebody in the midst of social quarantine and pandemic, but also as someone who cares for a large group of people professionally. So I'm gonna certainly be have my ears wide open tonight.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. There's a lot of just strangeness in the air, and it's difficult to put your finger on. I know that a lot of the clients that I've been working with have been struggling with this certain I don't know what, and really struggling to get some concrete hold on all of that. Annette, what have you been seeing?
I've actually been getting a lot of people that are experiencing the same type of things that we would experience, the same type of emotions as grief. They are going
We
through
are
the grief
sorry, but the show
stages.
has ended. Goodbye.
Hello.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I lost you there for a moment.
I did.
So
Can you hear
I'm
me?
sorry. What? Yeah, I hear you now. What kinds of things have you been seeing?
The types of things I've been seeing is a lot of my clients are coming to me saying, this is what I feel. I felt like this when they maybe lost a loved one. So what we're looking at is grief. I'm dealing with a lot of people who are going through grief right now. And those grief stages, everything from anger to, sadness, and it's that roller coaster of emotions. And when I really did take a look at those stages of grief again, because I hadn't looked at them myself in a while, I realized, oh my gosh, that really truly is what's going on. And I mean, it fits, I should say. And so I actually did a write-up not too long ago, a couple weeks ago, on those 7 stages of grief and how that affects right now. But the majority of my clients, that's exactly what they're feeling right now, is they're riding that roller coaster of grief. And so that's been a little bit tough.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really challenging to sort of understand all of this. I mean, it's a really unprecedented circumstance. You know, of course, there are the things like claustrophobia, the lack of exercise, the lack of variety in life that people are experiencing. But, this week I've talked to a lot of people that feel like they just don't understand their own emotions or don't understand their partner's emotions. They're getting sort of stuck up on. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm getting
And there's
sort of that knowing nod from both of y'all.
well, I've had people that said that they are now experiencing those emotions from a partner that they didn't know their partner even had. So it's so used to having a certain way of life, and now that partner is showing them a different emotion that they're not used to themselves. And if it's somebody who maybe that person is looking towards for security, now that person's kind of freaking out or kind of checked out for the moment, then that person then freaks out. It's kind of like being on that airplane, and when something is going turbulent, what do? We look to the flight attendants and see what they're up to. And if they're freaking out, then that's a signal for me to start freaking out. And I think that's what's starting to happen right now is people, their spouses they're seeing their spouses in a different light, and they're seeing their spouses start to get a little concerned. And now that rises their concern as well. And everybody's kind of starting to, lose that stable ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are so many things that we're just not used to, and we're still trying to figure out like how to process it. I've spoken to a couple of different people this week who have witnessed what might otherwise seem like a fairly normal interaction, where you see a parent maybe being a little harsh with a kid, maybe being a little bit less patient, and knowing what we know about just these close quarters, these really tense times, we can assume that domestic violence, that child abuse, that intimate partner violence, that all of those things are increasing. And people who have experienced that in the past are definitely on edge and maybe hyper aware of those things to an extent, such that any kind of everyday interaction can trigger a sort of traumatic response.
Yeah, I've been feeling that, not necessarily that form of abuse, but I grew up in a household where I was basically confined to the house, apart from accompanying my mom on grocery trips. So for a while, I was very confused about why am I feeling so many emotions that I thought I had put to bed kind of come back up and have to re-deal with all of this. And a lot of it I realized was because, this is the first time since I was an early teen that I was basically told you cannot leave the house except in these very particular circumstances. So yeah, that by itself has been kind of weighing on my mind a lot.
For sure. That's that trauma with that unresolved trauma. And if you've kind of put it in that bag and put it away and stuffed it away and shoved it underneath the couch or something and not dealt with it, then when things like something can come up, that becomes that trigger point. And like you said, now that's come out. So I've worked with a lot of people in the past who have gone through human trafficking and sex trade and stuff like that. And so right now, that's what they're experiencing, is they're kind of having that PTSD moment of now being told by the government, you're not allowed to leave your home, you're not allowed to do this. It brings them back to that time when they were told by their captors, you're not allowed to leave from here and things.
Yeah.
So I can definitely understand that.
Yeah, it's strange how this extra stress and especially the uniqueness of it can bring out these things we weren't even expecting. It wasn't until I heard somebody else put words to it that I realized how much of my personality, my fears, my coping responses have been affected by watching my crazy conspiracy theorist dad go through Y2K. You know, I haven't thought about Y2K pretty much for the 20 years since. And yet I found myself recognizing how incredibly stressful that time was for my family because of my dad's fears and stockpiling and doomsday prepping and all of that. And to now be faced with that in a way I really wasn't expecting.
Yeah, I remember very clearly my dad had a bunker all ready for us to travel to in Canada. So he met someone online who was like, you guys can use my bunker during the end of the world, which is, very neighborly. But we had people come into the house and talk about how we could store AR-15s in our empty guitar cases in the basement and where best to hide during. It was very strange. And yeah, the concept of stockpiling and eating out of cans and with all of these things that, get rid of the perishables first. It is very, very much a flashback and not in a great way.
Yeah. And the biggest thing for me is that I just never would have thought to think about how that could be affecting my day-to-day, about how interfere with my interactions with my partner, with the kiddo, with any of these kinds of things. The way our brains can just sneak up and surprise us. Anything else that y'all have witnessed that caught you off guard in that way?
I've been eating more vegetables than I used to. I'm actually eating better because I have time to actually cook, which
start.
Is nice.
Yeah, which is a little bit of it. It's supposed to be, but I have noticed a number of the clients that I work with being surprised to find that the stress has actually gone down. That now that asshole boss is out of the picture, now that fear of missing out is gone because there are no parties to be not invited to. It's just a strange time. Yeah. So with that in mind, I think we can go ahead. So we've got a few people in the queue.
Yeah, we've got a couple. Let's start with Jesse in New York. Hi, Jesse.
Hello.
Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Wonderful. Welcome to the show. What can we help you with tonight?
I was just calling in the whole, like you guys are talking about, pandemic and stuff going on right now has caused a lot of anxiety. Plus, I just came out as trans to my family, like my immediate family and distant relatives.
Oh, congratulations.
and-
That's very brave and very scary at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I've been under quite a lot of stress, like a lot of people have. But it's brought up a lot of like religious feelings that I didn't think I was struggling with anymore. In terms of like shame in general, and also like with all this stuff going on, my family's convinced it's like end times. And even though I'm an atheist, I don't really believe that. And my mother's convinced, you know, because it's end times, people are going to be changing their genders and whatever. So even though I don't believe that, it's brought about a lot of fear in me. So I was just wondering what is the best way to get over like religious indoctrination when it comes around shame over things like that?
That is a really good question. And before I jump into that, I just want to make sure that I have your pronouns. What are they?
He, him.
Okay, wonderful. So yeah, you're certainly not alone, Jesse, in terms of feeling a little bit of that resurgence of religious paranoia in terms of, is this the end? Is this what was foretold? Because I've got many friends who are dealing with the same thing, of many different denominations and factions of Christianity, where they were, you know, told, oh, you know, within 10 years, everything's going to end. And so, yeah, of course, every big concerning thing that happens is going to feel like a fulfillment of that prophecy. When you're told your whole life something bad is going to happen, and then something bad happens, it is very triggering and very traumatic. The thing to remember there, first off, is just, it's the world. There's really no sure, foolproof prophecy that something bad is going to happen at some point in the next 10 years. So I understand fully kind of how that will feel. But I would also encourage you to take a step back, take a breath, and remember all of the reasons why you aren't in that mindset anymore. I know for me, it helps to kind of go over, okay, exactly how did I get here? What was the reasoning? What was the logic? Oh, yes. Okay. And I kind of snap myself out of it. In terms of getting over the religious kind of guilt about expressing yourself freely and fully, that is a much larger question, and one I certainly am still trying to figure out. I would start by saying that, you know, there are cultures that are much older than the one that your parents ascribe to, that have experienced multiple genders, gender transition, gender realization. These concepts are older or just as old as the religion that your parents subscribe to. So that by itself is very helpful, for me at least.
Yeah. And I get that. And then I start feeling better. And then like I have like distant family that I spoke to, and I thought they were pretty like liberal, open-minded. And they were about like other family members' sexualities and such. So I was like, oh, okay, they're pretty chill. And I told them. And then once they realized I was medically transitioning and starting hormone and thinking about surgeries in the future, they completely changed and were like, I wouldn't want to see my son do that. I wouldn't, you know, see my son in person if he started doing that. This is really dangerous. And that was coming from someone who I thought was really open-minded, and that threw me through a loop. And it was like, you know, that even made it worse, because I'm like, now I don't know who to trust. And it just made it like it amplified those feelings. So it's not even just coming from the religious right. It's coming from people that I thought were more open-minded. So yeah. But with the religious,
Yeah, it's no, please. There's a little bit of a lag, so I think we're accidentally talking over each other a little bit. So I do apologize for that. But no, I think that there is a lot of misinformation going around about what is entailed when you have a sex affirming transition at all, hormonal, surgical, whatever. It's full of sensationalism and false narratives, and it's being propagated by people who have an agenda. And a lot of times, if you aren't doing good research and you don't have good research hygiene, you will end up falling for these concerning stories, even if you yourself don't have a kind of a bad motive yourself. I know a lot of people who are very open and accepting to a point, but then they've absorbed these stories that are coming from other people who are in fact motivated to hurt and to harm, and they don't understand that, and they're just absorbing things because it's being presented in a convincing way. So that's definitely, I feel that very strongly.
Yeah, that's a really great point, V. Because of what I do, I feel like I draw a little bit of attention every time I go to a party or whatever else. People are really eager to engage me in debate, and it's remarkable the opinions and the like sort of armchair quarterbacking that goes into other people's medical decisions. And Jesse, I would just say to you how sorry I am that you're having to bear the brunt of, what, if we're being frank, is bullshit clickbait type articles, as well as irresponsible journalism and just the propagation of ridiculous news. Because, yeah, a medical procedure, whether we're talking about surgery, whether we're talking about an outside medication, there's going to be some level of risk, but that's not why people are suddenly so concerned with your health, if we're being honest. And I'm really sorry that you're having to have those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really much you can do about it. And I kind of realize it's an underlying, I think I think ignorance plays a role in it, but also phobia, because it wasn't just, well, I wouldn't want to see my son go through that because it'd be hard for him. It was almost like, I don't want that rubbed in my face. So that says to me more oh, I'm grossed out by that. That's weird. I don't want to see that. So I think it's more than just, oh, I think it's dangerous and I'm concerned about you. So yeah. That is, yeah.
Do you mind if I ask, do you have other people who are supportive in terms of other people in the GRSM community who you can talk to, whether online or, well, really everybody is online at this point, unfortunately. But do you have a community online that you can kind of bounce these things off of, or would you like to go find one?
I probably should. I'm sorry. I'm just rambling through all my thoughts on the
No, I want to make sure that we're giving you resources if that's something that you feel like you would want to try. Our Discord and our even the live chat right now, these are people who share similar values to you, to us, and people who would be willing to listen if you wanted that sounding board. Because I know for me, having an online community, even when the people in my real, quote unquote, real life weren't being as supportive, really truly helped just normalize the things I was feeling and thinking. Because it can get really difficult to be in your head and be the only one experiencing something and being convinced by other people that it's somehow different or strange, when in fact there is a very large portion of the population who thinks and feels very similarly. So understanding kind of that you are not alone in this, and that this is not abnormal in any way. This is just a different kind of normal, and there is a community out there with whom you can connect. I think I just want to make sure that I express that to you as well.
Yeah, no, that'd be good. Because I really don't right now. I had the one family member that I told just in case things went bad, and that didn't work out. So, and I'm 27, I'm an adult. I'm not surrounded by, I've had an isolated kind of religious upbringing. So it kind of left me as a loner, so I don't really have many people to bounce it off except the therapist every now and then.
Yeah, let me just echo what V said. Encourage you to get in community in whatever form or fashion that looks like for you. I've been blessed to be here in Austin, where there is just an incredible queer community that, can gather around board games, can gather around bars, can gather around dances. I mean, there are all of these different type of options. And I don't know what your situation looks like, especially under this quarantine circumstances, but there are remarkable communities. The trans community in particular has done a really beautiful job of assembling, of supporting one another. And so I want to say to you that does exist. You can plug into it. And it may not be easy at first, but I promise that if you make that a concerted effort, you will find some connection. I think that can offer you a lot. Annette, did you have any kind of last tips or anything else for just getting through these awkward conversations?
Me?
You guys, what you guys said was great. And this isn't something that I don't come across with some of my other clients. It's that situation to where you're going to somebody thinking that that is a safe person to go to and finding out later that they're not. And it's because it's one of those situations to where a lot of people will say, well, that's fine. I'm fine with other people, but when it's somebody else now close to me, now no, it's not okay. And the kind of the reality comes through, and that's where you kind of get that mixed signal. And you thought you were going to somebody safe, and then it ended up not being safe. And then you kind of you can have a tendency, if you allow that to get to you, to kind of enclose into your own little shell, so to speak. And it's not safe anymore for me to go out and speak to anybody or do anything, and it really becomes more of a hindrance on your life. And you're now allowing these other people, to keep you from going out to that community, which is so important, to get that community support. And and it's tough, because I've been in those situations to where it's been it's fine if it's somebody else, but not in my house, type of a thing. I experienced that from a different angle, and the fact that I'm in an interracial marriage, and it was always, we're fine with those of other cultures coming together, or in my case, I'm with an African American man. They're always good, but then we don't want that in our house. And it was one of those things to where I then had to separate from those family members, and giving that toxicity to me so that I can continue on with my life. And somebody who has been absolutely my support system and the best thing, and we've been together for 7 years now. But it's very hard, because you do you're going to those people, you think it's safe, and then you find out that it's not. And then sometimes we have to make those tough decisions for our own mental health and our own life to move forward, and it's to cut those toxic people out. And unfortunately, sometimes that is our family, and it is really tough. But if they're going to accept you, then they, some people, they realize, if I'm going to lose this person, then they start coming around. They start, learning more about whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm not sure if they're really open into learning, but I'm going to try to keep them at an arm's length for now, until things do or don't get better.
Yeah, and they might need some time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And nobody ever wants to be blasé about losing family, about cutting off these types of relationships. And I'm certainly not going to encourage that or tell you that that's what you need to do. I am going to let you know that regardless of where these things shake out, you have that option. You have that right. And that is a possibility. And it's one that you can manage, and that you'll be okay coming out the other side of. I'm not saying that that's where you're going to end up. I just want to let you know that if that feels like the nuclear option, if that feels like the worst case scenario, I'm confident that you'll be able to manage that situation should it come. So I hope that gives you a place to start. I know that these are big issues and big questions without simple answers. I appreciate you giving us a call, and I hope that you are feeling connected and feeling in community.
Yeah, thank you. No, it was helpful.
Glad to
I'm
hear
glad.
it.
And I'd encourage you to stay listening on the show, because next we're going to take somebody who called in because of your call and wants to talk about similar things. So even on this show, the callers that we're getting are feeling the same as you do and want to show their support. So thank you so much, Jesse.
Yeah, thank you.
Have a nice night.
Well, glad to hear it, V. Let's jump in.
Yeah. Let's talk to Satanist Megan in Washington.
Hi.
Hello, can you hear us?
Can
Hi.
you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I'll take you off speaker here so you don't have the buzzing sound. Yeah, I was calling in. I got a lot of sympathy for that person with this whole end times thing and like all this, people like just coming together as one in the end. Like this whole like, oh, there'll be peace before, before I mean, from what I recall, it was like there's like world peace and then there's hydras rising up from the sea. But I mean, it's just such nonsense. And I'd spoken to Christy. It's been almost a year. I called in shortly after I had my gender reassignment. I was male to female. I'm now, post-op female. I called in about a year ago. It was back when Serafina was on the show. And
yay! I think she's going to be on next week.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, and I'm glad to see that you guys are happy. That you guys seem to be happy, anyways. I mean, you don't seem miserable on your shows. I mean, even though you're stuck, isolated, and you're pretty social. You guys are very connected, and you're involved with a lot of things socially. So I'd imagine this isolation is very hard for you.
Yeah, it's tricky, but we got our crew to get the technical issues out, so we're good.
Yeah, it's an interesting time for all of us, but it's actually remarkable that, we can even do something like this, right? That we can have people, I think tonight we were represented by like 6 households, not to mention Megan. So there's 7 different buildings all coming together to make this presentation happen, which is, I think, something to take a little bit of pride and excitement in.
Yeah, it's the ghost crew, and they've got those rings of invisibility, and people are so quick to laugh off Harry Potter, and validate their argument. Maybe the invisible crew, evidence, I don't know. But yeah, like I just, I've got a lot of love for anybody trans that's going through a hard time, follow your dream, follow, what you want, and don't listen to the end time stuff. I mean, this is a pandemic, but it's not like the first pandemic. Like, I mean,
right.
I did a report back in high school on the Black Plague, and it was really, from what I researched, it was a mixture of 3 different things that came together at kind of the same time period. It was Ebola, pneumonic, and bubonic plague. Pneumonic was the worst because people would go crazy. It had neurological effects. This coronavirus, what was it? The death rate of the Black Plague was like 70% or higher, and this coronavirus it's going to be, I'm guessing, 5 to 10% by the time it's done.
Yeah, we had a couple calls on my other show that were trying to pass this off as the biggest plague that ever happened and the worst thing, and therefore part of the end times prophecy. And clearly anybody who's trying to tell you that doesn't understand or has not researched just the concept of pandemics and the history of them.
Yeah, and there's inevitabilities. There's things that it doesn't take a prophet to figure out, I mean, these viruses, I mean, if you know anything about biology or anything, I mean, they mutate, they evolve at a rapid rate. They're microscopic, they're small, and they have an advantage. I was taught, I think it had to have been back like early elementary school and that kind of thing, about like body invaders, you know, and yeah, and you know, so it's just, you know, okay, so they evolve and evolve, and you know, like some people thought with the AIDS virus that it was going to go airborne and it was going to wipe everybody out, but it didn't. But I mean, just things like this are going to happen. I mean, viruses want to survive just like all of us, and they do it at a much more rapid rate. You know, they mutate versus evil. And I don't remember the full. I can't explain the difference between mutation versus evolution. But yeah, like the spread of the coronavirus to like the tigers in New York or whatever is kind of interesting. But
yeah, I think it's interesting that a lot of the same people pointing to this virus as proof of their belief system doesn't understand that the only reason that this virus is concerning or a problem at all is because evolution is a thing. So it would be interesting to bring that up next time somebody mentions that, oh, this virus is proof of my belief system. Oh, okay, well, here's how viruses work. Right, exactly. Well, thank you so much for calling, Jesse, and Megan, and for empathizing with our
I got love for everybody. Yeah, and everybody trans out there that's having a hard. No, this isn't the end of times. Do your transition. You know, like the day before I left for my surgery, like there was like this flash flood with like thunder. I was like, oh, you know, like I was like, I love flash floods and thunder, but if you look at the Bible, that might be like some warning from God, right? Like in the Old Testament, it's like I don't care, you know, like this life is all I have. And I had an experience in a dream too. I want to say this before I go too. Like I was in a dream, and you know. I consider myself pretty much de-indoctrinated because I never really was I grew up around it, but I had those problems with like how did the light get there before the sun, you know? So just from the beginning, and if it's infallible, and then having young Earth beliefs, I was like nah, and so yeah, like I just no. Anyways,
Well, I'm glad you called
wild
in.
times, and we're all figuring out. We really appreciate you offering your support.
Yeah,
thanks,
and
Megan.
you know, thank you for being there, and you know, keep doing what you do.
We will do so as long as our crew continues to be amazing.
Which V is something to, I guess, continue to highlight is the fact that, you know, when we tried to have Annette on the last time, we just weren't able. There's so many different moving pieces. There's so much that goes into putting something like this together that has nothing to do with you and I staring at each other and, you know, having these conversations. So I really want to stress to all the Atheist Experience Network viewers just how much work has gone in by not us, by some really incredible people that have been working on sorting these things out.
Most certainly. All right. We have callers coming in pretty quickly, but I know we also want to talk with Annette some more. So let's take one more and then move on to part 2 of the interview, and then we'll keep people online.
Sounds great.
All right, awesome. Let's talk to April in Kentucky. April, hi, can you hear us?
Guys.
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you.
Glad to hear. What can we do for you tonight?
Months ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm just curious of what we can help with. What's going on tonight?
Oh, it's so funny that I happen to tune in a lot of times on Thursday nights. I can't watch it live or listen live. You know, I have to listen to it later. And I hadn't listened in a couple of months, I guess. And so we talked back several months ago, April from Harrodsburg, Kentucky. You know, we talked about my coming out story and all that. And when Annette was talking about PTSD and anxiety and all of those things that you go through, you know, in those transitions from who people thought you were supposed to be to who you actually are. And then this coronavirus kind of bringing up all those old anxieties. It's so fortuitous, I guess, that I happen to be able to listen tonight, because a month and a half ago, for the first time, I went to the doctor and talked about my mental health, because that was a taboo subject. Mental health was of the devil growing up. if you have mental problems, well, that was just the devil attacking your mind, and you were weak, and the devil had found an opening, so you weren't allowed to talk about anxiety or mental health and all of those things that play into the religious portion of upbringing, especially when it's to the point of cult, like religious upbringing, so the doctor put me on, for the first time in my life, I'm taking something for anxiety. And it's something that for the last 12 years I have battled. I started, initially I would say it was a battle 12 years ago, but I sought to understand what I was going through. I tried to break it down and say, okay, why are you feeling this way? Where does this come from? Just take a breath and try to think about things rationally, logically, and put things in perspective. And I realized that from the very earliest memories of my life, I have always dealt with anxiety, the fear of who I was versus who they expected me to be, And that anxiety followed me through my life. And even though I came out, that anxiety had become almost like a PTSD symptom from all of that
absolutely.
religious cult-like trauma. Yeah, and I realized that, okay, this is affecting my life. It's affecting my ability to concentrate. It's affecting my ability to perform my job. It's affecting how I deal with people around me. And so the doctor put me on something for anxiety. And now it's so funny. I go into meetings that should be completely high stress, and I should lash out. And I just kind of say, fuck off. It's like, really, whatever, So... And it's funny because actually the last meeting I had at work, I actually had to put a manager in his place because in the automotive world, if you're a female, you naturally don't know what you're doing. That's just the way it is. If you are not male, you don't know what you're doing because the automotive world is largely, predominantly male driven. And you have to, if you're a female, you have to have the data, you have to have the supporting background, you have to have the history, you have to have all of your ducks in a row to prove your point. Whereas if you're male, you just have to say, well, this is the way it is, and they accept it. So I actually had to kind of lash out at a manager. I literally had to put a manager in his place in a meeting, and I came back to my desk and I looked at my supervisor. I said, I need to go back to the doctor. He said, why? Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, medicine's not working. I literally just ripped him a new one. He said, oh no.
Oh,
so,
goodness.
it's not meant to take this whole situation lightly, but I think it's something that you have to admit to yourself, honestly. You have to look in the mirror and say, what are you dealing with, and how are you going to deal with it? Who are you? Who do you want to be? And how are you going to get there? You have to look yourself in the eye and say, this is what I'm dealing with, and I have to take control of it. It's not going to fix itself. It's not going to change itself sometimes. Sometimes there's no positive energy that's going to fix that. Sometimes you got to go to the doctor and say, I need help, and I don't know. I guess that's kind of my positive empowerment kind of message. Stop trying to fix things yourself. Sometimes you need help.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that. So often we're indoctrinated with these ideas that, the joy of the Lord is my strength, that the joy of the Lord comes in the morning. I mean, all of these kinds of things. We should be this way. If we love God, then, these things are just going to naturally happen or fix themselves. When the joy of the Lord has absolutely nothing to do with it. What it really comes down to is the fact that there's not enough iron in your diet. There's not enough sunlight in your day-to-day. There's not enough this or that or the other. And these things can get in the way of actual solutions to real problems that are not imagined, problems that are not character defects or deficiencies in our identity. So I'm really glad to hear that you have received that you are no longer struggling because you've been able to get actual help. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us and for giving us a call tonight.
Yeah. And I just want people to understand that, especially the longer you've been through trauma, the longer those effects are going to manifest themselves physically, mentally, emotionally in your life.
Fair to say.
It's entirely different to deal with something for a year versus something you dealt with from the time you were 3 years old until you were 30, right? Because that becomes kind of a part of your life, and that becomes like PTSD, like Annette was talking about earlier. You so much ingrain that into your being that you think it's normal to have anxiety over certain things. And it's not. But for you, that's your normal. And you have to understand when your normal is not normal, right? And a lot of times it takes hearing that from someone else for you to say, okay, let me stop. I need to stop right now. I need to take stock of my life. I need to see what are my triggers? What are my anxiety points? What is it that makes me feel anxious? What is it that makes me feel, paranoia, right? Because growing up the way I grew up and knowing who I was at a very young age and the paranoia that came with and the anxiety that came with people finding out who I was, you learn how to read people. You learn how to read mannerisms and facial expressions and tone and body language to the point where you can tell what someone is feeling, even if they're saying the exact opposite, right? Because you have become so fine-tuned, and the paranoia has developed this fine-tuned sense of understanding and nuance with people.
That hypervigilance.
That in itself becomes another source of anxiety, right? So you have to realize where to stop the cycle.
Right.
Yeah. It's worth just reminding people that the S in PTSD is anxiety, is stress, is anything that causes that nervousness. So I appreciate you highlighting that for us.
Thank you so much, April.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hate to hear people who feel so trapped because I understand what that's like and I remember what that was like and I know what that paranoia feels like and the point, you get so anxious. Like I told you before, I had bleeding ulcers from the fear, just the fear alone, So I think it's one of those points where you reach this precipice and you're on you're almost like you're in a pendulum and you can either decide who you're going to be or you can let others decide for you. You reach that point where you have to make a decision. And you have to grow a spine. You have to grow a backbone and say, I am me. You don't get to decide who I am. It's not your choice. It's not your prerogative. And it doesn't matter what you think.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think it's difficult to get to that place, I think, especially as somebody who grew up hearing not only that their voice and their opinions didn't matter, but often it was the voice of some kind of evil spirit or the devil or something like that. So not only was it unimportant, it was potentially ominous. But once you get to that place and you get to that realization that, oh, I am my own person, that by itself, I think, is the biggest weapon that we have against indoctrination. And that's why indoctrination is so valuable to a community that wants to suppress certain types of people. Because if you can convince them that their voices don't matter or their voices are somehow influenced by an otherworldly source out to get them, that ability to say, no, this is enough, I am who I am, and take your shit and shove it back up your ass, pardon my French, is difficult. And so, yeah, I think you're spot on that needs to happen, and that's a turning point that is only ever going to be beneficial. It's just the getting there, I think, that is always so tricky.
Fair to say. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Let's, Chrissy, you want to jump back into the interview portion?
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a number of calls on the line. We're already starting to push time, but Annette, I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm really eager to talk to you about how people can be coping with all of this. So just to start, before we start looking at grounding and meditation and these different things that, are important skills, tell us what you mean when we're talking about emotional flooding and just that sense of being overwhelmed.
Yeah, emotional flooding kind of is that start of everything. At the basis, what's happening is we've got a great autonomic nervous system. It is fabulous. It does some great stuff, but it also screws with us. And so what
Fair
happens
to say.
is what happens is when you break it down to its basics, you've got your sympathetic nervous system, which is really in charge of those flight, fright, and freeze moments. It's that piece that has that reptilian brain section of it saying, hey, there's a threat coming at you. You need to start running. And it sends those signals to your heart to start racing. And that's where anxiety and fear starts. Well, fear kind of starts going, and then that can kind of go into that anxiety. And then you've got the parasympathetic on the other side that is in charge of your calm and your relaxing. It helps aid in digestion. It helps lower that heart rate that's already up. And from a normal day-to-day life, you should be automatically switching back and forth in between the two systems. What happens when you start getting that emotional flooding, which is really just a bunch of those emotions overrunning your system, flooding into you, so to speak, and your emotions then hijack your nervous system, and it says, I'm taken over, and it puts you in that sympathetic nervous system. And then what happens is you can't get out of it sometimes, and unless you know the skills or you know some of the techniques, such as meditation and some grounding techniques and some of the questioning that you can do to help get yourself into parasympathetic, or help that parasympathetic kind of kick in to help calm some of the effects that the emotions that are flooding in are causing, that's where you kind of get stuck in that sympathetic piece, and you start getting those anxieties. And if left to continue to keep hijacking and to keep going, this is where you run into depression, because with that chronic stress can lead you into depression. And it's kind of like, I look at it as like a circuit breaker box. And when it gets overloaded, and in this case, your system is getting overloaded with emotions, that's when it kind of, breaks. It kind of, now you're stuck in that part. And that's where depression kind of starts coming in. So learning those techniques such as grounding and meditations and yoga and different things, different tools that you learn that can help you kind of calm that system down and say, hey, wait a minute, let's stop for a moment and let's take a look at what's really going on. And another thing that kind of messes with us is our brains. Again, marvelous things, but it doesn't like uncertainty. It has to make that connection. And if right now what we're going through with COVID is there's a lot of uncertainty, so your brain will just fill stuff in for you, and it will always go to the worst case scenario. And then that then breeds in more of that emotional concern, that fear, that panic. And if you've had trauma in the past, or even if you didn't realize you had trauma, some of those emotions that you're unable to resolve right now or experiencing can be a trigger to bring on even more. And that's where you kind of get those PTSD moments at times, to where you're getting those flashbacks to other events, which is just compounding the current situation and making those emotions really just overtake your system.
That's so fascinating to hear. I'm really curious about how this, cabin fever that people are experiencing, this like low grade, constant hum of stress, can have the same effect as like a more sudden, acute Michael Bay explosion-y type of trauma.
Yeah, and with cabin fever, usually with cabin fever, it's more of an irritation. you may be confined to your area because of maybe the weather or something like that, and you're unable to go out right now because it might be unsafe for you. So it turns into it's a minor inconvenience, and maybe you're stuck inside, and it becomes this, you have an out though. You know that this is going to end in X amount of days, or just for the storm that's happening right now. A lot of people who get snowed in up in Alaska get this cabin fever a lot because of this weather this time, but they always know when that end date kind of is going to be, and they're going to be able to get released out.
Right.
And it's not something that they're being told you have to stay in when it's perfectly fine looking outside.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful outside and I want to go out and do things, and now I'm being told I can't. And in some cases you're being told you no longer have a job, so what it turns into is more of a traumatic event. And this is where people who maybe had traumatic events in the past, where they were maybe with a domestic violence or something, where they were told you cannot leave this house because of the following, that control over you. That's kind of what's happening now, because our governmental agencies, your city, your state, whatever it might be, and even our United States government is telling us you can't do this, you can't do that. And then you've got your bosses telling you you no longer have a job, so you have that loss of control, and that's what everybody's experiencing right now. So what we are experiencing is a traumatic event. And I always say that it's not necessarily the event that makes it traumatic. It's how you were able to process through the event, and how you were also able to recover from the event. Did you have the supports necessary to help you through or to recover in the end? And like I said, if you've had some sort of trauma in the past, this could be triggering moments for that, and it's bringing all that back up. So you're dealing with much more right now than just, I'm not able to go outside and I'm just feeling irritated. This is where all the fear, the anxieties, depressions are starting to come in, because your body remembers things. Your nervous system remembers, oh my gosh, I've felt this before. And the last time I felt this is what happened. And so it immediately wants to trigger into that sympathetic to take over and say, no, this is fearful. We need to get ready to run. We need to get ready for something bad to happen. And once that happens, it's really hard to stop yourself and be able to, kind of calm yourself down a little bit and kind of start. You need to be able to calm yourself just enough to be able for that rational brain piece to kind of kick in and say, hey, let's look at what's going on, and let's make a game plan.
Yeah. So how do we manage that switch? How do we go back and forth between sympathetic and parasympathetic? What are, I guess, the tools, or even just the broad category of tools that allow us to get from here to there?
And that's the thing, you just said it, a broad category. There is so many tools, and what works for one person isn't necessarily going to work for another. And I know for myself, even with meditation, there are so many different types of meditations out there. And I specifically use certain meditations to calm me. I use certain meditations in order to keep me focused. I have certain other tools that I use in order to get me to stop what I'm doing and to kind of redirect that brain from going, off the deep end. And practice makes perfect, is everything. It's not something that you just learn all of a sudden and say, okay, I've got the tools and now I'm ready to go. It's really utilizing those tools. And again, it's not just a one tool. You have a toolbox full of things, and you just learn from experience and from working with somebody even too, to help you be able to understand what might be the best tool for certain situations. Like I said, I have different tools for if I'm experiencing an anxiety moment. How can I stop that anxiety from happening? I have another tool to use if I'm slipping into depression mode. Doing that Socratic questioning as well, to be able to kind of stop yourself. I use a grounding technique, a mindfulness technique, to stop that brain pattern from fixating on the negative and fixating on going down that doom and gloom pathway. I'm able to bring it back, start doing the questioning needed that brings that rational brain into play to say, hey, okay, let's stop for a moment. The earth is not ending at the second. Let's kind of redirect a few things. And I have clients that I'm really big on, when I work with my clients, on let's look at what could come down the pipeline at you, and you be prepared ahead of time if something was to go wrong. And while we can't prepare for everything, we do look at things and say, okay, well, this could happen or that could happen, or whatever it is. And it's interesting because when this pandemic started, I started getting messages from some of my clients saying, where was this on my timeline? What do I do with it?
Didn't plan for this. Didn't prepare to be part of a once in a lifetime event.
Yep.
Exactly. But like I told them, I was like, listen, you have all the tools. You have the tools. You just need to realize that you have the tools and realize which ones are going to help you at this time. And in talking to them and helping them question themselves, then they realize, oh yeah, I could do this or I can do that. And a lot of them are using those grounding techniques. A lot of them are using that mindfulness and stuff like that to help them be able to stop that brain from taking them down the doom and gloom path. But while it's a horrible time that we're all going through right now, and there's a lot of different emotions and things people are going through, ultimately we are going to come out of this. And so just reminding yourself, we're going to get through this. So now what do I need to do right now in this present moment to keep moving forward?
I remember the very first time that I stopped an anxiety attack using mindfulness. It was game changing. I was like, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to do deep mindful breathing, and I'm going to light this candle and just watch the flame for 15 minutes. And I did that, and then I was fine. And I was like, I think I called everybody I knew. And I was like, you won't believe the magical spell that I just did.
This is witchcraft. I do love the idea of you staring into a candle in order to invite that type of magic into your life. It's exciting to hear.
It's hey, ritual. It helps me. But no, it was game changing when I first did that, and it was so simple, but it did take a lot of work to get there at the same time. So yes, I can testify to that for sure.
Yeah, we've got a stacked queue full of calls, and I definitely want to get to that here in a moment. Annette, I really would love for you to be able to teach us some of those types of tricks or skills or exercises. And I guess I just want to go ahead and preface all of that by echoing what you said, V, that these are types of things that you have to kind of get ready for, that there's a little bit of preparation involved, that, when you are in your right mind, when you're feeling well, you begin to develop those skills and to stretch those muscles so that you have them to be called upon when you do get flooded and when things do get extreme. So I really appreciate you highlighting that.
Sure.
With that, can we take a couple of just really rapid fire calls? I know we've got quite a few people on the line. I'd love to get to as many as we can in the next few minutes before we jump back in with Annette.
Perfect. All right. Let's talk with Sky in Poland. Sky is referencing our last episode, it looks like. How can we help you today, Sky?
Hello.
Hello.
Before I start, I just wanted to mention I have Asperger's, so if there's something that sounds wrong or something, please just let me know. I want to make sure there's no misunderstanding.
Of course, of course.
I've been thinking a lot about my own sexuality and everything, especially since Hugo started transitioning to Hannah and Jake, previously the Bible Reloaded, and I even started, I listen to every single episode of your program now, and I was thinking about invisible queerness and about my childhood. I finally mentioned some of these things to my therapist, and I noticed that throughout my entire childhood, I always felt like I fit in more with the girls, but I would be punished for that. Like at school, the only time I remember getting in trouble in the first grade is because I played with dolls with another boy. And like on edX, I'm taking a course about how there are 5 children, and they're talking about their trans experiences as children. And twice today, I felt like I couldn't breathe, and I realized how much I fit them. And it's just really hard for me. I don't know what to think. And like my therapist said that she thinks the reason why I always fit in more with the girls and feel this way is because I didn't have like a male figure in my life, even though when I was really little, my father was in my life and important. And I was wondering what you think about like an invisible queerness in children, and if like a lack of a male figure has anything to do with that.
Yeah, I'm going to leave that second part to our 2 therapists on the line. But I do want to say that your experience mirrors mine in that I didn't start thinking about my gender identity until I started seeing other people tell their stories. And a lot of the reason why queer stories and especially gender-related stories are discouraged is because people understand that that's a thing that happens. Once you find a community where that is normalized, once other people begin telling their stories and sharing experiences and saying, it's okay, this is just who you are, more people realize, oh, that's me too. And that's scary for a large majority of people, unfortunately. So yeah, I think that you've done a massive first step, which is finding other people who share your experience and relating that back to yourself. And that's a huge step. And it's not a step we talk about a whole lot, the process of actually drawing that line, that connective line between them and me. But it's huge and it's scary. And I just want to affirm that I've been there. I'm still kind of there. I feel that, and you're not alone in that. But I do want to pass this off to our more experienced therapists to talk about the more psychological aspects of this.
Yeah, Sky, I guess I'll just jump in and say that I'm not going to, backseat drive your therapist. This is somebody that you have a relationship with, that you've been working with, and that you have some trust with. And I really hope that that trust is well placed. I'm going to leave that up to you and, encourage you, of course, to be asking the hard questions to make sure that this is somebody who's worthy of your trust. All of that being said, yeah, it's absolutely a reality that if you are in an environment where you don't interact with a particular type of person, that you might not be as comfortable with somebody who lines up with that. If you were somehow in a total vacuum where you just had no men to interact with, then yeah, being around boys at school or whatever else might be a little bit more difficult. It might be a little bit more different, and that can be a challenge. I do have to say that it's a little bit of a buzzword, and it definitely made at least me cringe a little to hear about this idea of, well, you don't have a strong male influence in your life, so you must be broken, which is just silly on its face. I don't know that that's what your therapist said, and so I would encourage you to check in with that. But if that really is the type of philosophy that they're laying out in front of you, if they really are suggesting that because you didn't grow up with a dad in your life or whatever the situation might look like, that you're somehow broken or you're somehow unable to communicate with people of a particular gender or anything else, I just am devastated by that notion because it's such a common way of attacking people in the queer community, and it just has no basis in reality. That's not to say that your specific situation is X, Y, or Z, but I would really encourage a lot of healthy skepticism and ask you to push back and maybe ask some questions about where they're coming from.
It also is worth bringing in the caller, Jesse, the very first caller we had on tonight, and his experience of going to somebody who he trusted and somebody who he thought of as progressive enough to talk about these things with, only to have them only to realize that those people were not willing to go all the way, and they had fallen off somewhere between the conversation, the beginning and the end of that conversation. So it could also very easily be that you have had a good relationship with your therapist up till this point, but they simply are not equipped to positively or healthily guide you in this particular area. So I would echo Christy in that. Make sure that you are giving this a little bit of thought and saying, okay, well, yes, they may have given you very good advice and sound advice up to this point, but gender identity might simply not be in their wheelhouse or something they're willing to consider as a viable option. So that's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
Annette, you're back.
Yes.
Anything to add to our caller, Sky?
No, at the last moment, the last few minutes, I had no audio and everything was kind of scrambling. So I kind of unfortunately missed that last section. But from what I did hear, it was, great stuff. you guys did fine.
Well, Sky,
Okay.
let me
I
just
echo
check in.
your-
How does any of this resonate with you? I mean, are you comfortable with this therapist? Is this somebody that you believe is well equipped to guide you? Because I don't want to say otherwise, but I am concerned based on just what you've brought forward here.
I mean, like, I think a lot of the stuff you've said has helped, but like, I think Poland's at least 20 years behind the U.S. in, I guess, queer rights and everything. Like, I think every year there's a news story about how the media goes into a secret far-right group and they're like, we got to go kill the fags, those kind of people. And it's really scary. And like, I feel like I'm worried I could get deported if the government knew I identified as queer. And I'm a teacher. And you're right, it's really scary because, like, being a teacher and being queer would be extremely hard. And it's like something I read today that, gender isn't like optional. It's not like a voluntary thing. And I don't know what to think about it because it's very scary and like.
And I hear that, and I guess I just want to very briefly reassure you that we don't know that this means anything. The fact that you feel comfortable having a relationship with women doesn't necessarily reflect on your gender. I guess I kind of jumped on the concerns about your therapist because I do work in this field. I am passionate about sort of policing other people and making sure that we offer the best things. Sure. Well, I guess I just want to say that none of this means one thing or the other about your gender or about your gender identity. That's certainly for you to sort out. I just hope that you're getting the very best care and the very best help in doing that. If I can, I'd like to recommend a book for you that may help in sort of sussing some of this out.
Okay.
We'll make sure to include that in the footnotes for this episode, but I'd like to recommend How to Understand Your Gender by Meg John Barker. It's in very simple English and really well laid out, and I think it could be a great place to start.
Yeah, it's like all this is, it's like I'm losing my religion all over again. I grew up in the U.S. in a very fundamentalist Baptist area. I was like, when I lost my faith, I was completely broken and scared of hell. I couldn't sleep at night for years. And it's those same feelings all over again.
Yeah.
I remember even then when I was in the U.S., used to collect signatures for the Freedom to Marry Amendment and be like an activist in this, but I never realized that I could be part of this. And now I'm like really scared of this, and I don't know why, because I wasn't scared to help then. I even remember my dad argued with me. He was so mad at me for doing this. He said, somebody could shoot you, because I literally got threatened multiple times. And one time, even 4 police officers tried to intimidate me. And I said, well, that would be a good thing, because then everyone would see how ridiculous it is. Someone killed some random person just because they went a Freedom to Marry Amendment finally be on the ballot. I'm not scared of that, but now I'm really scared about this being visibly queer, and I just don't know how to handle this or what to do or what I can do, because like Christy said, I don't think my therapist really knows how they handle this, and I don't know how I could find anyone in Poland to help with this, because I can't even find like people that specialize in this, because it's so far behind the U.S. and like I've rebuilt my life here, and I don't want to risk that. I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, that is really, really tough. That is a really difficult place to be in. I do want to say a couple things. First, you have found us. You have found this community. You're getting a lot of love in the live chat. We also have online communities. We have a Discord that is more than willing to talk with you about this and to empathize with you. And a whole lot of us have had similar experiences. So even if right now you cannot find a physical community to be with in Poland, you do have an online community here, and we would be more than happy to continue talking with you. If you wanted to call back next week or the week after, we are here for you. And the other thing I wanted to stress is that if being visibly queer makes you concerned or gives you anxiety or frightens you, then don't be. You don't need to be in order to be valid. Invisibly queer and visibly queer are not, one is not inherently better than the other. There is no moral weight put to being out and proud, as opposed to taking care of yourself and going at your own pace. So if you do need more time to just think about this and digest it, if you are afraid of your job security or where you live not being very tolerant, those are valid concerns, and nobody is going to expect you to put yourself or your job or your livelihood at risk in order to be, quote unquote, a good queer, right? That's not something that we would ask of you. That's not something that anyone in the community would want for you. So moving forward, I think 2 things would be important to take with you. First, you have this community here. We are here for you. We want to hear back from you. And also, this is your pace. This is your journey. This is your story. You get to decide when and where and if you decide to come out, and what being visibly queer looks like to you. So that is my 2 cents.
Yeah, and would add to that is to say recoveringfromreligion.org. Please check it out, Sky. In addition to the great web community that you have here through us at the AC, a wonderful place to seek some support and some specific resources for where you are and what you're needing.
Yes, like I remember, like I was saying, it's like losing my religion all over again. The thing that really finally helped me feel better was when I realized I wasn't alone. And I found the videos from like the ACA, and I don't know how, but it just helped, because it's like I've always listened to it ever since then. Every week, it's just always helped me relax and feel better about these things.
Well, we're here for you.
Really beautiful to hear. Thank you so much. I hope you're taking care of yourself and that you'll stay in touch with us.
Yes, definitely call back.
Okay. I don't know if I'll be able to. It's already past 3. I had to wait about 6 hours to be able to call. But
Oh my goodness. Well,
Goodness,
we
yeah.
will
We appreciate
if
you.
we see you call in again, we will make sure to prioritize you so we talk with you sooner.
And
Thank you.
and
Thank
call
you.
our Ask line, leave us a message, shoot us an
Yeah.
email. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care of yourself tonight.
okay.
Thanks, Guy.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, V, we're running a little bit long on time, but this is good stuff. I don't want to end the party. Let's take a few more calls if we can.
Sounds good. Let's shoot through these. Let's talk with Charlie Marsh in Yakima, Washington. Hi, Charlie. I know who you are.
Hi.
Hey.
Yeah, you know who I am.
I remember you.
Well, one of the reasons. Huh?
I remember you. What's up?
Well, since the last time I saw you, V, I got on testosterone.
Oh, congratulations.
Hey, congratulations.
But I have a lot of questions. Kind of what's happening is I got on testosterone, and a lot of things about my identity, both as a trans and the way I see myself and my sexuality, is severely in flux right now. And I've had some pretty strange reactions when I brought this up to a person close by that didn't feel supportive. And I thought, am I unusual? And I thought, I want to talk with Christy. I want to talk with V about this. Kind of what's going on is, as you know, V, I have always considered myself by gender. I got on T, and now I'm feeling myself really hugely shifting way to the other side and feeling like I'm actually very much a male and not so much in the center where bigender is. So because that's occurring, how I see my sexuality has done a major shift as well. And by that, I mean, always up until now, I've said, well, I'm bigender or bisexual, and that's that. And since then, my bisexuality, I'm not saying I don't feel bisexual anymore. I'm just feeling more on the side of being more like a gay man. And I brought this up one time, and I was told, nope, that's not possible. If you have even the slightest attraction to a female, you cannot consider yourself really being a gay male anymore. So
because them's the rules, and we get to decide. I'm going to tell you about you and label you.
Yeah, that's kind of how it felt, too.
Yeah.
And I'm just going, am I unusual in that just getting on testosterone could do such a huge... I mean, I've only been on testosterone now a month, but yet these huge fundamental changes are happening in my identity and my sexuality. Am I weird?
Yeah,
I mean,
no, not at all.
Only in that you are willing to
weird.
go there and ask these questions.
Yeah. I will definitely say, before you even completed your sentence, you said something along the lines of, I went on testosterone and I was just like, that doesn't even matter what the rest of the sentence is. It's probably, there are so many folks that have dramatic shifts in their mood, in their libido, in in their sexuality. And we can talk all day about whether or not these things are chemically caused, whether or not they're chemically confirmed, about whether they were always there. And this is a really interesting philosophy and debate. But let me just settle it on this point by saying that, yeah, you started taking testosterone and you're feeling very differently. That in and of itself is remarkably common and something that I hope you were prepared for, but no matter how much people warn you, when it hits, it hits.
Oh yeah. It's like, I was like, I think what surprised me is just the whole thing of my fantasy life totally did this change, and I'm not sure if it's because now I'm giving myself permission to feel myself as a male, you know, but it's like even that has changed, and I'm just like, wow. I mean, I was prepared for all these physical changes, but for what's going on in my head, not really. They tell you, but you don't know what's going to happen with that, you know?
Mhm.
And also the whole concept of like, can I claim that? Can I actually claim gay male? That's something that was always denied to me, even though it may have been inside my brain and inside my heart my whole life. It was always denied because, well, you're a female. Well, now my body is actually changing, like physically changing, like incredibly in a specific area of my body. And it's like, well, oh, wait a minute. Yes, I can. So, I mean, that's been the huge thing. And then just to feel like somebody who says that they're female to male even, and somebody I trusted and somebody I looked up to, and to have them like put that on me, like, you know, you have one iota of a desire for a woman, there ain't no way that you can say that you are a gay male. It just, I don't know. I don't know how to describe the feeling of just like, wait a minute, everything you're telling me is so opposite of the way I experience it, and I didn't expect to do that within somebody who says they are female to male.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just want to emphasize that there is this weird kind of purity test thing that happens, especially with certain labels,
Mhm.
especially with gay and lesbian. What counts, what doesn't count. And there can be a very toxic subculture that pulls a lot of people in. Again, going back to a previous call, sometimes people themselves aren't trying to be malicious or have malicious intent, but they've absorbed a certain narrative and it simply sticks. And I would say that as far as what gender is and what sexuality is, like they're fluid, they're spectrums, they are messy and complicated and strange and influenced by a whole host of things. And to say you need to be 100% one thing is this, yeah, it's just a weird purity test. And I would discount that concept. If you want to call yourself a gay man because you are a gay man, then that is what you are, and nobody gets to decide that except for you.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I still see myself as bisexual. I just see myself as leaning way into this area, which is weird because before testosterone, I saw myself leaning way into the other way. So, oh well, I don't know what that has to do with it. It's just that when my body began to change, especially in like the private area, the thought hit me and I went, I can claim this, you know, and it was like, somebody just turned a key and turned an engine on that I didn't think I would ever be able to obtain until I got on testosterone, if that makes any sense at all.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there are
definitely.
enough
Okay.
people with power telling us how to label ourselves, telling us how to manage our sexuality, telling us how to describe ourselves. We don't need to be doing it to each other. And I recognize that happens. I recognize that it happens for a reason. Some of those reasons are actually pretty valid and legitimate. And we did talk about that in some detail last week. But I'll just go ahead and continue to say as many times as I need to that you get to decide who you are. Nobody else gets to label it. And I am frankly just a little bit tickled and excited that you got to have a moment, that you got to say to yourself like, oh my God, am I? And then whatever else comes next, that's on you. That's up to you to decide. And I'm really glad you get to have that. And I appreciate you sharing that moment with us.
Yes, thank you very much. But yeah, I also wanted to share it with you guys because I've been on here before with you guys when I talked about having gone to conversion therapy. I think you guys remember me from back then. So this is like my second time. So this is sort of in a way an update, you know, and
I love
letting
it.
you guys know that I've
Fair to say, yeah.
Yeah, I've progressed.
I love it. Thank you so much for the update. Thank you for letting us know where you're at and for voicing something that is very important for us to address, and something that you certainly are not alone in feeling. I'm very happy to have heard from you.
Yes, and like I said, it's just like I don't know where this journey is, and that's for anybody that's listening. We don't know where the journey is headed, but just enjoy it. You know what I mean? Because it's a beautiful trip to take.
I agree. Thank you so much for your optimism, Charlie. I appreciate it, and definitely call in again.
I will. Love you guys. Bye.
Bye. One thing that I'm loving about tonight, and I don't know if it's just that it's different being in this format or what, but I feel like we're getting a lot of really very different types of people calling in with very similar stories. Like the messages that they leave us with are all across the board, but at the same time, they're all sharing these very deeply intimate and important concepts. I don't know. I'm very excited about this. We have one more caller from Columbus, Ohio. Artems, I'm not quite sure if the call screener wrote your name properly. Hi, can you hear me?
Hi there. It's Artemis.
Artemis, hello.
Glad to hear from you. What can we do for you tonight?
Yeah, so I wanted to say I'm a huge fan of the show. I've been listening for probably a week or so. I listened to Talk Heathen and what's the other one? I listened to a bunch of your guys' shows, and then all of a sudden one day heard about secular sexuality, and I was like, how have I never heard of this show before?
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
I ask people that all the time. How have you never heard of this show before?
Oh.
Yeah, so I've basically been binging it and wanted to give a call and kind of voice my issues I'm kind of having and see what your guys' take was on it.
Certainly.
Sure. What's that?
Go for it.
Yeah, so I grew up in the cult known as Mormonism, and as you guys probably know, it's a very against sex cult to be in, and you're taught from a very young age that it's not something that you're supposed to like, to enjoy, that kind of stuff. And I was homeschooled. I was kind of raised by my parents, shown for the longest time, what their worldview was. And eventually I went to high school and I met all these other people. I met gay people for the first time in my life who weren't the scary, evil gays that my parents seemed to think they were. And I realized these are incredible people. I love these guys. They're all my friends. And then I realized, wait, I'm one of them. And yeah, so over that, I kind of learned to embrace that, to kind of accept that I am that, and learned that, I like sex. I like that kind of stuff. It's fun. It's nice. It's not something that God's going to damn you forever for enjoying. And I'm not entirely sure how to come out to my parents, say that I am trans, that I am all of these sort of things that they've raised me from a young age to not enjoy. And yeah.
Those are certainly difficult conversations to have, and I don't think that there is a template that we could possibly provide for you. It definitely does come down to who you're talking to, what your relationship with them is, how much you care about their opinion, and how much you trust them to be somebody that, is worth your time, is worth, some of the emotional labor and blood, sweat, and tears that go into that conversation. I would start any conversation along those lines where people are sort of being accusatory or saying this is wrong or this is this and that is that. I would definitely encourage just the simple question of why. That's whenever I'm talking to, whether it's one of my clients, whether it's somebody who's being antagonistic, whether it's, just the 11-year-old at home, it's a question of why. If this is wrong, if this is bad, justify that position. Explain it to me. Give me some reason. And I hope that reason is better than because somebody 2,000 years ago believed it to be.
Yeah. I think the biggest problem for me would have to be that my dad is kind of a big figure in the Mormon Church's Sexaholics Anonymous, essentially, is what it is. He is very much not a fan of porn, of that kind of stuff. He has the idea that everyone who does it is forced into it, doesn't enjoy it, doesn't like that kind of stuff, and that it's degrading to them, and has that mentality. And I kind of...
He's never been to a cocktail hour at my house. I'm sorry, Artemis. I didn't mean to interrupt you. The technology makes it a little awkward, but yeah, the reality is I know plenty of porn performers, and they are happy and they're sad and they're mad and they're whatever else because they're people, but they're not miserable because of what they do, generally speaking.
Yeah.
I would also say that there's definitely a pressure to come out when you realize who you really are. And I feel weird because I feel like my thing tonight has been like, well, maybe you don't have to come out. And that's not the takeaway that I want to present to our beautiful viewers. But
Stay in the closet. Vila Bianca.
There's a pandemic out there.
Yes, stay indoors.
No, but my point is that I think that there is a narrative in the queer community that if you don't come out, then you somehow are lesser, or you're not fully complete yet, or it's still a step that you need to take. And of course, you have to start with your parents, and then that is probably going to go sideways, and then you have to deal with that. And it's this very particular narrative that unfortunately has a large foothold in reality, and it is a lot of people's experience. But I would also say that if you know that your parents are not going to take this well, or if you are concerned about your physical or financial safety, or if you are, I don't know how old you are or where you are living right now, but if you are living at home or would feel like you would have that put in jeopardy if you were to come out, you certainly are not being pressured to by anybody. Ideally, coming out should be a celebration, right? And it should be an exciting time that you share with the people you love. But that's not always the case. And you don't need to suffer through rejection by people you love in order to be a valid queer person. You can, of course, I know there's this cognitive dissonance that will follow not coming out, not being true to who you are at all times. I currently am dealing with that myself. I have not come out as non-binary to my family in any official way because I know that that's not gonna fly with them, and it's not gonna be a get out, but it's gonna be, instead of accidentally misgendering, it's going to be now intentional misgendering, and there's going to be that distance and that difficulty either way. So there is that to consider as well. If you don't think it's going to go well, if you are weighing your options and thinking that, I wish I could just leave it for now, but I feel this pressure to come out or to say something. I would encourage you to do some thinking on that and to not let the peer pressure from the common narrative persuade you in one direction or the other.
Yeah, I've actually known this for I'm going to say 2-3 years now that I am a member of the queer community, and definitely at the start I felt that push to come out, to embrace it, live it. But I knew it wasn't safe for me. And now that I am just about 20 years old here, I am working. I have almost managed to get myself an apartment. I kind of want to let them know, to tell them, hey, this is who I am. But at the same time, there were multiple times in my teenage years where they asked me straight up, hey, are you gay? And, me being me, I said, oh, no, definitely not me. I would never be gay. No.
Good. Well, I'm glad that you seem to be you're making the right choices in terms of you're looking out for yourself, you're making sure that you're getting a place to live, that you're financially independent, and that it sounds like you've put thought into this, which is good. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, it's just kind of, how do I step on those eggshells without breaking them?
Yeah, and that really is the question. I hesitate to even add anything to what Via said, because the most important things are the things that she's highlighted: the taking care of yourself, the should you even have this conversation, the is it safe to stand up for yourself, is it smarter to retreat, and all of those kinds of things I really want to emphasize and not subtract from. I will point out that the dearth of research and evidence is on your side. Whether we're talking about porn addiction or sex addiction or the negative outcomes for transgender folks or for gay folks or anything along those lines, there is just constant and overwhelming research that's going to support your position. And should you decide to dive into it, that can be a tool in your arsenal. And, I might direct you towards things like The Myth of Sex Addiction by David Ley and some other books along those lines. But I think V has the right of it. This isn't necessarily a question of are you right, are you wrong, so much as should you speak up and what will you benefit from it if you do?
Yeah.
Well, if you do decide to tell your parents and it goes amazingly or it doesn't go so well, either way, we'd be interested to hear back from you. If you would like to call in the upcoming weeks, we'd definitely like to continue your journey with you.
Yeah, definitely. I'll consider everything and try and figure out a game plan. Thanks for your guys' help.
Absolutely.
Thank you
Glad
for
to hear
calling.
it. Take care.
Bye.
All right. Well, busy night. Lots going on. Definitely sort of a chaotic and crazy world.
Yeah.
Yeah, Annette, I know we have kind of had to sideline you as we're dealing with all of these exciting and interesting issues.
No worries.
Well, I don't want to let you go, though, without
I just
leaving our
love
audience with
people being
something to
able
work
to
on.
get the help that they need.
Yeah, well said, and
If I can
important to
say
remind people.
That's first and foremost is people getting the help that they need, whether it's for their mental state, for whatever it is, reaching out. So I was excited to see so many callers tonight. So I'm glad to see everybody's out there, working on themselves and getting the help and supports that they need. So that was awesome. So I don't mind being sidelined for that.
We would love to leave with a couple practical tips to take away, though, if you'd be willing to stick around for maybe 5 more minutes and give us a couple of tools to use.
I'll give you one of the big basic ones. It is the easiest, and it is it's kind of the basis for a lot of things, and that is breath, breathing, and the proper way of breathing. We want to make sure that you're doing deep, long breaths from the belly. So what you're doing is you're inhaling through your nose, and you're taking it about 4 to 7 seconds to breathe in. Of course, don't ever make yourself exert yourself to make yourself uncomfortable or anything, because sometimes you have to build up that lung capacity because we're so used to breathing shallow. And when you shallow breathe, that triggers that that sympathetic nervous system to start running, because that is increasing that heart rate and stuff. So when we try to do long, deep breaths, you inhale through your nose, you hold it for a couple of seconds, usually about 4 or 5 seconds, and then you're going to exhale, but you're going to again exhale very slowly. So take that time to exhale out. And again, fill up the belly when you're breathing in. Don't breathe from your shoulders and your chest area. When you're breathing in, your stomach should kind of stick out. And that is going to help trigger that parasympathetic nervous system to kind of kick in and do what it needs to do. And, that kind of gives you also that few moments that you need for your brain to kind of take that break and say, okay, now I'm going to be able to have a little bit of clarity, have that rational piece of the brain pop in and start doing what it needs to do and ask appropriate questions so you don't go down that dark pathway.
Wonderful. Yes, breathing. That's want to all take a breath right now?
Yeah.
Everybody watching?
Deep breath. I didn't want to do the deep breath because of my mic. I didn't want to be endanger our poor audio.
It makes our audio techs really upset, which I have to say tickles me just a little bit.
You
but
are
if it
now
makes
their
you
favorite
feel
person, though, Annette. They are now your fan. So
I have to tell you though, Annette, when you started talking about it, I without even meaning to, just sort of subconsciously felt myself sort of straighten in my chair, sort of puff out my chest, because this really is the type of thing where, as silly as it may seem, it's breathing. You've been doing that since before you were born. That whole thing. It is something that you can practice and that you can then bring in those stressful moments. As soon as I heard you reference it, I found myself finding that posture and sort of puffing out my chest and breathing in this very specific way that is informed by the last couple of years being very intentional through guided meditation, through yoga therapy, through hypnosis, these other practices to develop my breathing skills. And it has meaningfully impacted my life. So I recognize that it feels strange and simple, but it's beautiful.
And it's really helpful, especially for somebody with an anxiety disorder. The anxiety that manifests is, what am I supposed to be doing right now? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? What do I need to be doing? And to be able to teach yourself before you get into that headspace, you need to be breathing. That is something that is important to do. And if you're doing that, you're doing enough by itself usually gets me out of that headspace of, okay, I'm doing what I should be doing right now. This is not a whim. This is not slacking. This is intentional. This is necessary.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And there's so many people. It's kind of funny that we all go along thinking, well, I know how to breathe. I've been breathing all along. And it's funny because I have many clients and even, colleagues and stuff that I've been around, and they would all say that their watches would tell them to breathe. And they always thought it was funny. And they always said, why is the watch telling me to breathe? I know how to breathe. And I'm like, no, it's trying to tell you to do the appropriate breathing moments. Have you taken that deep breath? And at the basics, that breath work can go into everything. It does go into yoga. It does go into mindfulness meditations. It does go into other groundings. There's so many different things that all use breath work at its basic level. So I always say, if there's one skill that you're going to have that you're going to need to master and be able to utilize with everything, it's proper breath work.
Wonderful. As we kind of close out, Annette, do you want to just pitch your counseling services? And I know you were talking before we got online the very amazing offers that you're holding right now through April.
My purpose in life is to help everybody, and it's always that pie in the sky. I'm going to help everybody. It's like I learned the secret, and I lived horrible life for so long. Once I learned the secret and able to live a great life now, I shouldn't say a great life, but able to manage different things properly. I just want to share it with everybody, and it is always my purpose in life to help others, no matter what it is. And my biggest thing is I never want anybody to not get the help that they need because of their inability to pay, or because of maybe they're uncomfortable with certain situations or whatnot. And so for this month in particular, for April, and it will also be continuing on, possibly, we're going to be reevaluating things constantly on how long we're still all in, solitary confinement here. But for this month, I'm offering my services for free. I have shut down all of my pay services. All of my existing clients are getting extra help from me, and we've suspended their pays for the moment because some of them have been on payment plans and stuff with me. And I'm allowing people to message me through my website at Eclipse Life Coach, and they can message me through there or contact me whichever way they can. And we can get set up on some sort of a little bit of a program to where if you only need me once a week, if you only need me once and that's it, I'm here for you guys. And so I'm just offering my services. And starting next week, I'm bringing some of my yoga and meditation also to online classes as well for free.
Amazing. Thank you so
That's
much,
an
Annette.
incredible offer. Yeah, absolutely. And I should mention that you recently wrote a really beautiful blog about this specific crisis and some of the unique challenges that come with it. We've got links to that in the show notes to this episode, and we're really appreciative to just have you here. That website again was eclipselifecoach.com.
Yes, it is. And there's plenty of other blog posts on there about grounding techniques, about resiliency, about a whole bunch of different things that are all kind of can be used on here during this time that we're all going through. And there's ways to contact me through there. And even if you just have a quick message you want to get to me or a quick question to ask, feel free to message me. And, I'm here for you. I have my set of clients that I see throughout my days, but I am opening that up, and I do everything via Zoom. So if you are, wherever you are, I actually have people overseas that I actually speak to as well. So, wherever you are, reach out. Even if you just need to, do an email to me, we can go email back and forth. Some people are a little nervous with the face-to-face, and everything. So, but I just want to make sure everybody's getting the mental help that they need. It's so important because it affects so much part of your life. Good mental health will boost your immunity, which is something, let's face it, we need right now.
That is true. And we're doing our little part as well. We will be here next week. Next week is a mailbag episode, which we're excited about. We got some amazing emails the last couple of weeks that we haven't been able to get to because we've had so many callers, which is amazing. Yay. It's a good problem to have. But we will be reading through all of those next week, hopefully with some cool guests. And in the meantime, if you would like to call in next week, the number is on the screen. We also have our voicemail box at 512-666-0ASK. That's 512-666-0275. Our email address is sex@atheist-community.org, and our Twitter is @secularsex. So if you want to get in touch with us, those are the ways, and we will look forward to seeing you next week.
I suppose with that, it's time to thank you all for sticking us out with this extra long episode tonight, for coming back and joining us, Annette, for coming back after all of our technical issues. I definitely want to thank our very sexy, very invisible ghost crew as they work from different places all over the city and all over the country. And encourage each and every one of you, whether you're visible or invisible, to go out and give yourself a big ol' orgasm. Or, better yet, give somebody else one.
Somebody else one.
What are we doing, man? What are we doing?
No, you're done.